So, welcome to video one. I was holding for a while in thought, like what would be the best way to go about presenting the inner wounded child and the deconstruction around the inner wounded child in order to gain a sense of self. Um, but I think in these videos, you'll notice that I take a clinical viewpoint working with the inner wounded child, but perhaps it will still be insightful for those listening to build some curiosity, perhaps to start to critically think. I have often said when working or presenting in groups that a critical mind or a thinking mind is a mind or body with a self in it. So it might build some curiosity. I think to begin, I can talk about the inner wounded child, and when I talk about the inner wounded child, it's best actually to ask probably about three questions. So one would be, when was the last time that you freaked out to the point that after you kind of shocked yourself? Um, so that's one. The other one is when you become like so upset about something and you no matter what you can't shake it, you can't get it off you. It can take weeks, months, sometimes years. So maybe hold that. And thirdly is one that is a sense of hollowness. So you can't explain it, but you have this like hollowness or emptiness that perhaps you can't rid. And if you've checked in or any of those have resonated with you, I would probably invite you to the idea that's your inner wounded child. So, how do I describe the inner wounded child in a way like it's a concept? So, we want to hold that. It's a concept. It's a construct. So, it's built up around a couple things like um, emotions that have not been able to be, I call it discharged, or clinically we might say catharsis. It hasn't been attended to. The construct moves around attachment and how we've attached to early caregivers. Um, the neuroscience around it as well, um, and ego development. So over time, and we have time, we can look at that. So that we can start to question or perhaps explore how this is part of our identity, this inner wounded child. And it is a part of who we are. So, again, let's just hold that. Maybe that'll just allow some critical thinking. So, I'm going to just build one more thing, and that is the awareness of how to support yourself, maybe, or if you're a clinician of any sort, or working with clients in any capacity, how to help them heal that inner wounded child. How do we integrate them? So, okay, there it is. That's the start of that. Um, I'd like to talk about maybe me for a moment. And perhaps how this comes close to me and my story, or what has built my curiosity around that. And myself, I am a survivor of chronic childhood trauma, also known as complex post-traumatic stress disorder or complex trauma or developmental trauma. I speak of it today as a resilience because, of course, after sustaining such like ruptures relationally with your early caregivers, which means they're your caregivers, but there's a lack of trust or an inability to trust due to um, abuse of any kind. Um, of course, there's going to build a resilience, right? Because in that in your early childhood experiences, you can't ever gain a sense of safety, right? Like you can't ever land in your body or land at home and actually feel safe. And so if every day you go into that type of chaotic environment, um, again, your body will perceive it as chaotic. You will then be created or form an identity around a survival response. And there perhaps may be unattended emotions that you want to connect to that might be unconscious now. because you have formed around a survival response to endure or to survive. And your body doesn't know the difference. For me, I can say survive to get through, but when you're a child and you're growing up in this environment, it would perhaps mean in order to survive, because if you don't, you will die. Like it has that type of serious or yeah, like a more serious connotation to it. So I bring in my story, and I have worked over the years to address the traumatized parts of myself and to do some integration. I might smile and talk about it lightly, but it is really difficult work, and probably one of the most difficult work I've done in my lifetime, despite the adversities that I have faced. But that is healing. What it's done also, it has given me eyes like that can really feel for people, and a heart that sees perhaps what most may not. And so, yeah, I bring that part in just to introduce myself into the work. I don't know where to start. I think that perhaps maybe just in this video, perhaps just to maybe talk about trauma, because I think trauma comes with a lot of definitions, a lot of meanings. I have notes all around me. I probably won't need any of them as I start to talk. Things will probably just organically come together. So just bear with me. And then you'll also notice, probably as what you watch my videos, that I am a survivor of trauma, which means that I can easily dissociate, and I have to be really mindful when put on the spot or like working to actually be embodied and to stay connected to myself. So I'll acknowledge it and say, okay, my mind has moved away, or I've lost my train of thought, and it will probably just be part of the process over the videos. And I'm hoping to do maybe about 4 of these. So today I want to like maybe just look at trauma and understanding trauma. I don't know, what's trauma to you? Like, how do you hold that term of trauma? Now, I have a way of debunking and like demystifying or destigmatizing whatever words or like concepts and ways of being out of the norm. And I don't know, when I work with trauma and like pull it apart, first of all, it is so individualized. It's no trauma has ever been the same or similar. And that perhaps is because of your nervous system and how your nervous system deals with, and your body deals with, feeling helpless and unable to escape. And trauma to me just comes down to those terms, that it is a form of helplessness, and you're unable to escape it. And that impact is what perhaps kind of opens up trauma or invites this idea of trauma. So trauma could be chronic, like childhood trauma, or chronic trauma due to the nature of work that you're in. It could be a single event. It could be a series of events. I've worked with someone where it was 50 hours of 50 hours of near-death experience that created a traumatic, life-altering life for her. And that was just in a 50-hour duration or duress. So again, it's very personal. It's based on your central nerve, like your nervous system, your body, and how it adapts or how it tries to cope with that feeling. Now, your body, that helpless, I can talk about like overwhelming life experiences, but I kind of don't want to get into the too much. I don't want it to be too wordy, really, is where I'm going with that. So let's hold chronic childhood trauma or chronic trauma, and we can define it by, let's look here, like as significant suffering. Let's do that. Significant suffering as a result of neglect, physical or sexual abuse in your own home by a caregiver. That would be childhood. Chronic, we can move the physical abuse out and hold significant suffering. That See how personalized significant suffering. So that is, however, that is internalized for you. Usually trauma does happen in a relational context, especially if I hone in, and my research was done around chronic childhood trauma. So I might keep bouncing back and forth between there because I spent a year just deconstructing and working with that. But it's relational because everything is relational, actually, when you think about it, right? It's about relating to and how we relate to others. And how we relate to other is how we relate to the world, right? Per se, or we can say. So I think for that, I will hold that. And then I will probably want to just kind of introduce trauma in regards to the brain and the nervous system and how those two kind of connect together, and the chronic misattunement, which means that there's something happening and we don't attend to it. So it just plays over and over again. And so this may cause the brain to seize. That's what I say. Like, it will stop developing. It may cause a misalignment. It might kind of get jammed or stuck there. And this is what, over time and on Instagram, I've been talking about trauma brain. This is here, like, perhaps the trauma brain. So that's that. Yeah, I think we can hold that there. I'm open for discussions about it or comments about it, however you'd like to do that. You can find me on Instagram on @Wounds2Wings. And I'm very open. I'm very, as you see. So if there are questions and you want to reach out, wounds2wings@gmail.com. Or you can find me on the website here at www.wounds2wings.com. So reach out. Let's chat about this first video, introducing the concept of the inner wounded child, and kind of introducing trauma, the term trauma. I'd like to hear what you define trauma as, and we can continue to explore it and organically move into these videos here. Take care.